We learn that through conversations and culture. Like, did you ever play the game of life, the board game?
Yeah.
The only way you win is getting a college degree in that game. That creates a subtle belief about why we have to go to college. You ever played Monopoly, of course? How do you win a Monopoly? Get as many things as possible. It's a zero-sum game, winner-take-all game. And we start buying into that belief with capitalism that isn't really what true capitalism or free market would be. It's what cronyism becomes. It's what
somebody else made the
survival of the fittest versus collaboration.
You talked about the things that you're you thought were most important for other people to hear. And of course, your journey led you to the point where even though you were saying the things that would help people, right, there was resistance on that kind of initial layer that they were not able to get past. Therefore, they weren't helped.
Right.
So maybe get into where you've come with your understanding of what wealth is, like what people are pursuing, and maybe unpack why aren't people achieving levels of life that they want, especially in the society where all the information, all the books, everything's there to do it, but yet people are still stuck in a sense.
So wealth to me is knowing what your win is and living by your rules and your win, not everybody else's. We lose wealth when we try to conform to society, when we try to please others at our own expense, when we buy into this notion that this is going to be a temporary thing, that we're going to give up so much of what we enjoy so that one day we can finally live a life that we can love. And the problem is those habits become who we are. So I just had this conversation today with someone that I said, I'm leaving social media. And I'm like, well, how are you going to do business? I'm like, there was business before social media. There will be business after, but social media is not part of my win. It's not part of my wealth. I don't want to have digital assets where my how I'm viewed is based upon the number of subscribers, the number of likes, or the number of comments, because then I start thinking superficially about what would be viral or what would be controversial or what would be, versus like being who I am.
Yes.
And so this is a weird notion, but I've had kind of like a renaissance in my life where I decided hobbies were going to be as valuable as to my wealth as my business activities. They would be on par. They wouldn't be like beneath that. And I started taking courses on being a barista. And then I just built this, my friend Mike Klein and I built this thing called the Roast, which is it's got a big bougie seat and I can pull it behind my e-bike. And then it's got a chalkboard that you open up and it's got an espresso machine you put up there. It's got a generator on it and it's got a sound system. So I could roast coffee while I roast bad financial ideas, almost like jaywalking would be on the street. I could do. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of fun. And then I became a whiskey sommelier. And then I started to learn how to fish. And then, I started taking classes at Traeger and I went and shot a elk with a bow. I just started doing these things that weren't really anything to do with money. They were just about my own enjoyment. So I started thinking about what art do I enjoy in life? What are my art forms that I would do for myself? So I write some poetry sometimes and I obviously comedy was part of that. And some of that crossed over into a business world or into a financial aspect. But the start was considering my life and myself valuable enough to take time for myself for no other reason than I would enjoy those moments, not because of validation by the external world. And by doing that, I feel like I could be more connected to the world versus having the world tell me what wealth is or what my win is. And so that has been really this revitalization of my life in the last few years. And I feel more inspired. I feel more ability to connect with people. Like a lot of my hobbies have to do with satiating experiences, either meditative experiences or satiating. And satiating experiences are, how can I create conversations that lead to connection? When I'm making a latte, I'm listening to someone. And then we sit down and we have that latte and we have a conversation while we sip on that latte. which prolongs that conversation. I started smoking a tobacco pipe every now and again, maybe once a week or so. I ended up doing that with my dad, who grew up Mormon. So that was a surprise that he enjoys it. And the other day, he texted me talking about he's having some tobacco and pontificating something about life. And my mom's like, "Oh, that reminds me of my dad. He used to smoke every Sunday." And I was like, "Oh, because that's a 30-minute smoke, and it's a beautiful artifact." And so I just started to invest in hobbies, and I have this philosophy in life that I win when I play. So how do I play? I play doing comedy. I play writing, like even my new website I'm writing today. I'm writing things that are funny and enjoyable that are part of that process. So I created life on my rules and on what my win is. And so I'm not trying to retire from anything. I'm not trying to run from anything. I'm no longer trying to hide from anything. And that can be difficult at times, but it's so rich and rewarding. So that's wealth. When you know your win and you're living your life based upon winning all the way along, not about arriving somewhere.
So that was the point I was gonna make, and I would say a follow-up question, because this is something that I think most people would resonate with. Oh, that would be nice. And they look at you, they look at others, right, that fit that persona, and they say to themselves, well, I have to do this first in order to do that.
That's sacrifice. And unfortunately, we learn that through conversations and culture. Like, did you ever play the game of life, the board game?
Yeah.
The only way you win is getting a college degree in that game. That creates a subtle belief about why we have to go to college. You ever played Monopoly, of course? How do you win a Monopoly? Get as many things as possible. It's a zero-sum game, winner take all game. And we start buying into that belief with capitalism that isn't really what true capitalism or free market would be. It's what cronyism becomes. It's what
somebody else made the
survival
definition.
of the fittest versus collaboration. And so I'm like, I'm playing games that everybody else told me to play. Go to college, get a degree, have a big business, grow that business, which was always about, well, I'll take care of my health later. I'll have time for my family later. Those were always in the background. It was like, and then the great lie that all business owners ever tell their spouse, which is, I'm doing this for you, but it's not. It's for our own fulfillment of our narcissistic ego and this unfillable void of more is better and all those kind of notions that we learn in society, especially here in America. And there is merit to some of that, but there's a lot of false reward to a lot of that, especially when we're trying to prove something to other people. As soon as we try to prove something to someone else, like I was practicing my comedy set, and I had a terrible night. I was on Zoom, had some people on, including someone who used to coach me in speaking. And I had some friends in a dining room, and there's a chef in the kitchen. It was at my friend's house, and my wife's in there doing her culinary homework in the kitchen, and it's noisy. And they're like, "Hey, how long can you be done in an hour?" Well, my set's an hour and a half. The worst thing you can do is take an hour and a half in comedy and make it an hour. The best thing you can do is go, I guess I won't share a third of my set. And I condensed it. And the guy said, "Well, you really sucked." And I did. That's the truth. It wasn't good. But what was really hard is not to have that be a chip on my shoulder and be like, "Oh, wait till I do this on the night.
I'll show you." But
what I did was I waited, and a month later, I finally shared it. And he goes, "Dude, I can't believe it's the same thing." I'm like, "Yeah, I had an off night." Like, I definitely did. I learned a big lesson from that. So, and a big part of the lesson was just along the way enjoying it. Like, not waiting for April 15th, but being like, "Oh, I had this set in March in Ogden and at the Wise Guys Theater there." And it was like, it was an amazing set. And it was one of the best nights. I'm like, it wasn't that night was only good if the April 15th was good. It was like, as a standalone, that was a win. That was an enjoyment. Just enjoy that moment, extract that moment, not be like, "Oh, I hope this goes." And like, even leading up to that night, my last line I thought was awesome. I couldn't wait to say it, but I was like, I want to enjoy every moment on that stage. And I think often in life, we're trying to get to the next moment. And it's a silly movie, but it was really a movie that impacted me. It was Click. Did you ever see it with Adam Sandler? Yeah. He could fast forward through anything.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, he's old.
He missed everything.
He missed everything. And I think that most people would do that
if they could,
without proper perspective, because I think that we've learned that pain is something to avoid. But what I've learned is pain is part of the process. And it's a gift, even if we don't like the wrapping. It's a tap on the shoulder. And if we're willing to go through it with love and compassion, that on the other side of that pain is always connection and lesson. And so to me, I've learned how to, like this morning, my wife, she woke up early. I'm like, what's up? She's like, I'm just really sad because I'm trying to get our son in this camp, but he's got to have certain vaccinations. But my son had a really adverse reaction to a vaccination back in the day, so he's not up to speed on certain tetanus and polio, which I don't even understand why he would have to have that. And she's like, so I don't think they're going to let him in camp, and he's struggling with friends. I was like, my thing today was like, oh, well, if you need to call the camp and have me on the call, be on the call. But otherwise, I was doing my best not to get sucked into like thinking that I have to make her happy, or that's my responsibility, or that there's something wrong with her being sad. And she was able to get a hold of the camp, and they're going to let him in and all this. But I think that even what she did, I do a lot of times, which is we suffer the future. We start thinking about what's coming up, and we start thinking what could go wrong with that. And we start suffering today for something that hasn't even happened. And 99% of what we worry about never is reality. The stuff that are really the biggest problems are things we could have never predicted. And I feel like we're going to have the tools, and we're going to have the lessons through those, even if it is painful. But the people that struggle the most are the ones that try to avoid the pain, hide from the pain, run from the pain, go around the pain when going through it is the only way.
Want to master your money? Want to figure out the things that you could do to improve your finances? Click here and check out more videos like this on Money Matters.